it's Jill Gillespie, and today we're going to do a tutorial on side plank, and I'm going to walk through a bunch of variations of side plank practice we can do to work our way up to the unsupported version. And so I'll show you the pose we'll be working up to. Or the last variation we'll be doing, I guess I should say. You don't have to work up to anything, but here's my least accessible variation. So, starting in plank, and then coming to the side, stacking the feet. Some classes might also offer this variation or this one, but you have a lot of options before you get to those ones. We'll just say that. So my trusty chair to sit and talk to you. This is my talking chair. So to build side plank, we can spend some time in our chair working on, again, those kind of actions we're working toward. And so with side plank, we will often start in regular plank. So if you saw my plank and my down dog videos, you'll see a lot of me waving my hands at the screen. And so we press the floor away from us, but we also keep our shoulders broad and back. And then once we've set up that foundation, you walk your hand in, and then keeping your spine long, engaging your core, you kind of you start turning your way into this shape. We won't do that sitting in the chair, but this is kind of an exercise you can do to kind of get the idea of starting in a plank position, transitioning one hand right under your nose or right under where your shoulder is going. We don't always cue this a lot in classes. We're like, now lift up your right hand and go into plank. But for me, because of how wide my plank stance is, I'm not really joint stacking sometimes. And so I'll often take the extra step of walking my hand more under my body first and setting up my wrist right back under where my shoulder is going to be again. And then I can peel myself up into my twist. And so that's something we can work on here, is just replacing the front hand and then twisting, replacing the front hand. And then resetting. And so that's kind of how I work with the arm and just kind of the twisting motion to get into that twisted variation of the plank. And then you'll realize very quickly, once you try to stack your feet on top of each other, it becomes a balance pose. And so it's hard to balance. Sometimes you're only on one hand and one foot. So that, you have to kind of work on your foundation under you in that case. And then another thing is to not just sag your hip. And so if you're open into your side plank, I'm not going to be able to do this in the way that I'm seated, but we'll get there. Your hips have to keep you held up, because if you just start sagging your hips and losing your form, then that's not the fun in the posture. And so we'll talk about different ways that you can work your way up to just the one hand, one foot on the floor variation. And so I am going to start at the wall because I love my wall. And so if we're working on side plank at the wall, we can set up our wonderful plank foundation with our arms at shoulder height. And then when we're ready, we can walk our right hand or our left hand, but I'm doing right hand, in under our nose a little bit, Find that stacking from the arm to your shoulder, and then open yourself up to the side like this. And so if you start pretty neutral with just your feet as far away as your arm distance is, that's a pretty stable way to just start practicing the idea of rooting the bottom of your hand into the wall, pulling that belly in, finding that structure in your core, and holding your legs together. And just really sealing up the energy in the lower half of your body. And so from here you can keep playing with maybe walking your hand a little bit down the wall and walking your feet a little bit more away from you to add a little more slant to this pose. And then in this place that's a little bit more safe than just being on the floor and you don't have to balance as much, you might play with lifting that top leg away, or making your tree, or that bind with your big toe there. And so that's a way to start working on just the idea of doing a side plank, is just starting at the wall and then maybe walking yourself down the wall a little bit. And so then trusty chair is also here. That I don't do this on the back of the chair very often because they're all different and don't always make sense in the chair you have, but the same logic can apply. That you take that plank, you walk one hand to the center, kind of getting it under your shoulder and ready to go. And then you might just work on the twisting without maybe the stacking yet. So I don't know, this is a lot of work on my wrist if I try to go into it just on the back of my chair. And so this might just be a place to work on preparing to be open in your chest and in your back. And then when you're ready to get a little more into it, then we have our chair seat that gives us more of a floor experience, and we can plant our hand there more. And so as we move closer to the floor in this pose, we might start to have that experience where it's a little bit more work, and maybe we feel the hips trying to fight us a little bit. And so your intermediate place could be working on your gate pose here at the chair and just finding some side opening options here. And then when you're ready, I need to go on my other arm for a second to keep myself even, or I'll go crazy. But you would start with keeping both your feet on the floor, and then you decide if you want to try to stack, and then if you're going to add any feet variations to it. Just remember to keep that core engaged and don't let your hips sag. It's a very, very strong, not this pose. It's very open and up. And then when you're ready to play on the floor a little bit, I have my blocks. And so again, you can use your books and everything else we've talked about. My blocks are just the easiest thing to work with for video right now. So our blocks can serve a lot of different purposes when we play with a plank. And so you can have just some support under your hands as you start playing with the idea. So here's gate just all the way to the floor, but my hands are up just a little bit here. And then I can work on this engagement in my center body that's going to support all of me by working on just lifting that back leg, just to work on that shape for a while. And then we might eventually work our way to this kind of kneeling side plank situation here, or just staying with that back foot down. If you're ready to start working on the version where your knees are both up and you're ready to take that twist, you're ready to take that twist in your body. So you can keep both of your feet on the floor here. So step one is keeping that more stable base where you have an extra foot on the floor, and then that top knee can bend, that top knee can pop behind you. You can just have some extra support as you work on building this kind of core strength here to help hold you up. And then if you're in a class or you want to explore playing with all the fun leg variations, but you're not super strong in your core yet, but you just want to play, what I've been working on, thanks to looking at videos on the internet, is that you can bring the floor up to your hips using a block stack, and you can make your block stack as high as you want and need your hips to go up. But what I can do in this case is I can prepare for my side plank and then just let my hips rest. Still working on drawing in my core, keeping my shoulders wide and open. But now I have a place where I can now play a little more stably with the bottom half of my body if I'm sick of just not being able to do things because the top part of my body isn't ready for it yet. And so we can play, I'm even still having balanced things on this block here, and so you can continue to play with those variations with blocks under your hips. So that's kind of how I wanted to play with side plank today and help build up to our unsupported version. And so, and you always have options to take rest when you need. It's a lot of work on your wrists. So just make sure that at some point you take time. I like to flip my wrist and press the back of my hand on the floor a little bit after I've been working on my hands for a while. And just really shaking it out, shaking out my shoulders. But whatever variation you're deciding to work on, the foundation and setup principles are the same. Our shoulders are broad and staying with our arms and our sockets, and everything is strong there. And then we work on keeping our belly drawing in and structure in our hips. And the hips are really kind of stabilizing us and helping us through these poses here. So that's all the stuff I wanted to talk about the side plank up to this point. There's also fun things you can do past this point, but we don't have to talk about that right now. So I hope you have a wonderful day wherever you are, and I will talk to you soon.